Good to go? Good.
Just because Curtis gave it money to convert that.
This meeting come to order. Please pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
Young is absent. Carroll.
Here.
Fosdick.
Here.
Morrow.
Here.
Gearbaugh.
Here.
Heft is absent, and LaForte's absent.
Staff member present is Akins. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve as distributed, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for January 8th?
So move. Second.
All those in favor?
Hold on. Is it January 8th or February 12th? What's the date on the?
It says January 8th.
Oh, these are the draft minutes.
You're right. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I have no objection to the motion. Just want to make sure we're approving the correct date.
No. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as of February 12th?
So move. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comments. Person is requested but not required to state their name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 persons. Seeing no one, we'll move on. Public hearing, 25-06, ordinance number 876, and ordinance to amend section 2.01, rule applying to text, section 2.02, definitions A through B, section 2.04, definitions F through K, section 2.07, definitions S through W of Article 2, Appendix A, and section 5.03, accessory structures of Article 5 in Appendix A of the City of Saline zoning ordinance. Mr. Atkins.
So at the time we were putting this together, right before we sent it out, I realized that the public hearing that was sent out was incorrect. At the time, it wasn't. These ordinance amendments just grew and grew and grew. And so it was originally only supposed to be for 5.03, then all these other sections were put in. So it's my belief that I would withdraw this from consideration this evening. We've already submitted another public hearing for the first meeting in March, so no decisions have been made
In April.
Or April, yes, sorry. So since the public hearing was put out, we still had to have the meeting, which is good. There's a lot to discuss in here. So no decisions will be made, but we'll still go through it. So, excuse me. This started out with expanding the table in section 5.03 for accessory structures beyond, what was it, 16, can't find my page, excuse me, for properties over 12,000 square feet, just to keep it consistent, and everything was increased by 90 square feet beyond that. So the larger the parcel, they can have a little bit larger of an accessory structure. Then it went through and was looking at definitions, and this goes back a few years when accessory buildings were in one category and garages were in another. So it's since been consolidated to accessory buildings and structures, but then there's language throughout that interwove the two. And so the intent is to eliminate any confusion of the difference between accessory building and accessory structure. They are interchangeable, but I just wanted to be more concise. So anything that would be detached from the primary building would be an accessory structure, and that includes sheds, garages, greenhouses, pools. I put solar panels in there, also ground-mounted solar panels in the definitions, and touched on roof-mounted solar panels as well, because that's something that's coming up. And some historic districts is a little bit different than what it would be in the normal districts. Also changed the definition of the height of the building. All other buildings that don't have the standard gable roof was to the highest point of the building or structure. And so we just made it consistent across the board. The highest point of any building or accessory structure is to the highest point. So it was half distance between the top of the wall and the peak. Then definitions for solar collections there. So for section 5.03, as I mentioned, just made it a little more, a little easier to understand and to differentiate between a principal building and an accessory structure. That it's calculated into the lot coverage area, raise the height of accessory buildings across the board to 15 feet. And then put a qualifier in there for anything that is in the R3 district or R2 district, I believe, that's going to be 24 feet. The intent behind that was if somebody wanted to put an accessory dwelling unit in one on the second floor of an accessory structure. But that wasn't noted in here, so the way the ordinance reads now, if somebody in that specific district wanted to build an accessory structure 24 feet, they could. So now if they want to do one that's 24 feet in height in a new building, the accessory dwelling unit has to be built at the same time. So otherwise they could only do the standard height of 15 feet. Increase the setbacks from 3 feet to 5 feet for the side and rear yard. Increase the distance between any accessory structure or between accessory structures or accessory buildings to 10 feet. That was 8 feet. The purpose behind increasing it from 3 to 5 feet from side and rear lot lines is you may have an existing building at 3 feet that with no delineation between properties. And if a neighbor puts a fence in there, that leaves you a very narrow space to get through there. Hopefully, increasing it to 5 feet might avoid any issues between neighbors being on properties, other people's property, if they have to do maintenance to it, mowing over there. I've seen some pretty weird things in the past with structures that are close to lot lines and neighbors. This will put some into non-conformance in the event of destruction or fire. The foundation's still in good condition, or if it's not destroyed beyond a certain percentage of the overall structure, they can rebuild in the same place. So any new building coming in would need to be at least 5 feet from side and rear and 10 feet from all other buildings. Further down there is for corner lots that it can't be on the secondary front yard, the non-addressed front yard, it can't be beyond the lot line or the front yard lot line, and has to be facing that road. They could have a secondary driveway. And then going back to the ADUs in the public hearing that was put out, I'd like to address some other, expand on that section a little bit more with ADUs and how they can be utilized and different restrictions that could go in there. Swimming pools, just consolidated that and then added a section in there for the solar panels. Mostly ground mounted. And I believe that is all for this section.
questions?
Just more on process and procedure. I guess a request, Mr. Aiken, since this was an issue that was at least in part brought forward by Mr. Schneider, can we make sure that we are proactively communicating with him and his family that this item will be reconsidered? You said at the next regularly scheduled planning commission meeting, which should be April 9th?
April 9th, correct, yes. Yes, I will reach out to them.
I have a question. If a property owner wants to build less than 5 feet, and he has the neighbors okay, is that permissible?
No, they would have to get a variance at that point. If it's a new build and they want to go 3 feet, under the current one, they could.
Right.
If this is adopted, it would have to be 5 feet from the property line.
Why wouldn't just a neighbor's okay be good enough?
Because it's in the ordinance and they'd have to go in front of the zoning board to get permission to do that. That's not a discretionary or a decision we can make administratively any more than we could for somebody wanting to put a house a little bit closer to the side lot line.
Just seems like for accessory structures especially, typically they're closer to the lot line and 5 feet seems kind of onerous.
Some of these are sort of dictated by fire codes and building codes too, aren't they?
Yeah. I don't recall what the fire code is. 8 feet is in my head. And right now if you have two that are on separate lots that are only 6 feet apart, it doesn't meet the fire code.
One of the things I was talking with Chris was about my concern about creating a lot of non-conforming concerns because we have buildings that were built with those 3-foot setbacks and such. The issue ends up being what should drive it? Is it building codes and safety, or is it, how do we want to handle this? Because even the other issue is going to come up is when we start talking about density concerns and issues. How do you start building things closer? But the primary concern on this one was partly the fire, because we had some issues where they went to ZBA and they had to get variances when ZBA granted some variances that they shouldn't have granted because there were non-conforming uses which were created by the homeowner that were being continued as non-conforming uses after they had already removed it. And so when you get into this, it's like, when should a variance comply? And in this situation, for the most part, it's going to be that issue. If a building gets burned down and then it's 3 feet from the lot line and you can't move it or reassess it, that's when a variance should apply to prove that hardship and everything. Just asking a neighbor that I want to build it close to your thing isn't really a hardship. It's been determined by the community that we have these standards. So for me, one of the things on this too was we're increasing the height. And I think what was the other one? Oh, the definition of what structures are, because we used to break out carports and garages, and so now we're just basically identifying everything as an auxiliary structure, right? The one question I had is what, in terms of an auxiliary structure, is allowable without necessarily triggering some of this type of stuff? So if I want to put up a shed under a certain size.
If it's under 200 square feet, then you wouldn't building code, building permit application would not be required. It would still have to meet the setbacks, be it 3 feet or 5 feet.
And generally, that would be as if somebody filed a complaint or a concern, or you discovered it, right?
But if one party wants to build it within 3 feet and there's nothing on the other side, then there shouldn't be any reason not to allow that. It just seems that we're adding a lot of restrictions on, especially people that own small lots.
Yeah. The 2 feet is not going to make or break something like that. I mean, the smallest lot width is 60 feet. So to add 2 feet to that setback is not going to be a big hindrance to anything.
Actually, I own 2 properties with 60 feet, and 2 feet is a big hindrance. So I can tell you that's not the case.
I guess it depends on how big the structures you want to put up to and what it's going to be used for. You know, if there's, I can't come up with any examples, but it's suggestion just for safety is what it comes down to. Then once we have, if somebody wants to put in a accessory dwelling unit, one of these, I'm going to propose that the setback be even greater.
I would definitely agree to that.
Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, you could put an accessory dwelling unit in one that's 15 feet tall. I don't know that anybody would want that 3 feet from their property line, especially if it's
All right, any more further comment?
Mr. Aiken, do you want us to convene the public hearing and then move to postpone, or what is your recommendation about the process tonight?
This public hearing will essentially just die since it was the application, since it's by the city, is withdrawn because the public hearing that went out for tonight's meeting was only specific to 5.03, not the definitions and other sections that were expanded on. So it is.
The motion to acknowledge your receipt and then motion to postpone consideration until our next regular meeting on April 9th.
It wouldn't be a postponement or anything, it would just die.
Okay.
And I kind of, Danica and I went back and forth because I don't want a motion to deny, because then I don't know what that, if it would have any repercussions for the next meeting since it was already denied once. So it's just kind of, the public hearing was put out there. Didn't get a very large crowd tonight, so.
Will there be a different memo?
Yes.
So then we could acknowledge this one tonight, and then you'll produce a new one that we can,
Yes, because the
Then we'll
next
deal
one will
with
have
that
the
one.
accessory dwelling units.
so we can basically end it with acknowledging your memo and then move to other business.
Yeah, because the item was discussed, make sure it's listed on the future agenda as unfinished business.
There's going to be another section in there. I guess we could break them out.
Okay, if there's going to be another, if there's going to be another section, I think you could probably just, well, it actually has to have a public hearing, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
It'll be a whole new memo with new information in it, so.
So it'd just be a new public hearing, okay. I withdraw.
So I'll move to acknowledge receipt of the report dated March 21st.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, noting that there's no additional action that's requested, required, or recommended, and there's no discussion items, I would move to excuse the absences of Chairperson Young and then at-large members Heft and LaForte.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Any other business?
Couple items. Find them here. Just think about, I might bring it for discussion at the next meeting. Well, the ADUs we talked about a little bit, but then temporary structures. It was brought up that, a lot of portable tents are being used, soft-sided structures are being used to put vehicles in. That is prohibited, and we'll get our zoning compliance officer on that. Prohibited for storage or vehicle parking. They are permitted for graduation parties or parties in general for up to 72 hours. And then another one is for yard use. Right now, this situation came up earlier this week or last week, I don't recall. Driveway width, and if there's setbacks for driveways. Right now, the maximum width of a driveway you can have at a residential property is 27 feet. That's very wide. You could fit 4 cars across that all.
Yeah.
And there is no setback distance from property lines for driveways, so now you're looking at issues with runoff, and where's that runoff going to go if it's right at the property line, knowingly dispersing water onto a neighboring property. I don't know if it's illegal, but it's highly frowned upon, especially where there's smaller lots and they're offset. So I'm going to suggest reducing the driveway width to 20 or 22 feet. That way you can still put 2 cars side by side if necessary and have enough room to get out, with a 5-foot setback from property lines to give it some space to the runoff, to go. So
You know that, you'll be proposing those as discussion items or action items on April 7th?
those will be discussion items. Got a little more research to do on them, to see.
Chris, can we add to that discussion? One of the things we've been talking about for the last couple of years, both Brian and myself, are site plan reviews, making sure that compliance is happening with the site plans. And
Yep.
we've had so much back and forth, either from supposedly legal opinion and such. And, you brought up even examples, which is detention ponds. Do they need fences or don't they need fences and some of that stuff? So if we could talk about that and what we can do in terms of progressing forward with whatever we need to get that under view.
Yeah, I still haven't found anything about the development we spoke about versus the current development. It would have to come down to the slope, what the grade is, and the depth. I mean, we're talking at Maple Oaks, I can't remember, it was 3 or 4 feet deep versus the one now that's 9 feet deep and a lot smaller with no fence around it with Maple Oaks. And I can't find anything. I remember having the discussion, but I don't think that was something that was required to put a fence around that. Whereas down at the Heritage, there isn't one, and that's right close to the road. So I need to speak with engineering to find out if there is some rule for that, or if there's a way we can legally do that. I don't know why we wouldn't be able to. I mean, we make people fence outdoor storage, so and that's just aesthetics versus something that could be life-threatening.
So we also require around pools and things too, so this gets that. But I mean, for me, that's an example of one of the things, that landscaping, I think there were other things that are on sites that we know have not been complied with, fences, that kind of stuff that needs to be double checked to make sure they're complying with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since Mr. Gearba brought it up, a bit of low-hanging fruit, if you will, and I've messaged on this before, is the fence in front of CBS. So if you drive along the city's eastern corridor, Mr. Gearba, of course, made inference to this, which is a number of developments were required to put in gateway features when the projects were planned and executed. And if you drive along US 12 east of Ann Arbor Street or Maple, you see that a lot of the properties are actually very well maintained with nice fencing. The exception being CVS, which hasn't put a coat of paint on that fence in several years.
Okay.
And that's a requirement of their site plan. Site plan is to maintain an appropriate, safe, aesthetically appealing fence.
Sure.
So I think your predecessor had sent one communique to them, maybe in the late spring, early summer of 2024, but that ought to be done again.
Okay. All right, I'll review that, see if I can't find any documentation. Otherwise, we can send the code compliance officer out there and have him speak.
Simple. It's a pretty simple coat of paint. Make a world of difference.
And just one last item, when we talked about this a little bit before, is an update on the abandoned car wash and what we need to do with that one, because it sounds like we just need to take a couple steps.
I spoke with our building inspector about this late last week, and directed him to move forward with condemning it.
Okay.
He was going to reach out to consultants and get the process. I spoke with the interim city manager about it this morning as well.
If you have any more tangible updates on that particular issue, it would be beneficial not only to share it with this group, but also planning, or city council.
Yeah, actually, we sent our code guy out last week, and within minutes of him arriving, the owner showed up. So I don't know if that was coincidence or not.
He's local.
Yeah, and it was relayed to him that there was problems with funding, and they're looking into different sources right now. I'm not telling you anything that we haven't heard for the past number of years.
Yeah.
So, and
Heard it all.
be moving forward, and that's when I said, let's condemn it.
Sure.
I remember hearing that about 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Hearing it for 20 years. Yep. 2 decades.
Oh, and the other one, the update, we're moving forward on the Thorncrest actions too.
Yep, yes, Thorncrest, it's been filed with the courts. And I got an email from the attorney yesterday or Monday stating that we're just awaiting a court date now. And the Myland, who's under the same ownership as Thorncrest, they got their court date for April 2nd, I believe. So her hope is that we get the same date.
Good. Mr. Chairman, if there's no additional items, noting that we've excused the absence of our 3 absent colleagues, I would move to adjourn this regular meeting at 7:26.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.